Hey everyone, this is my video on cellular respiration and how 30 molecules of ATP is produced. So cellular respiration, what is it? It takes place inside the mitochondria, and this is when we take the food that we eat, particularly the glucose molecule, and we break it down in the presence of oxygen to make ATP out of it. Here's the formation of what cellular respiration is. So it's going to take the glucose that we've eaten in the presence of oxygen, and it breaks it into carbon dioxide and water to form ATP. So glucose, where does the energy sit? So in this molecule, the energy is going to sit right on the hydrogen on the outside of the glucose, and the hydrogen will fall down and grab onto oxygen because oxygen wants electrons, so that's where the energy is coming from. This energy is used to make that ATP that our bodies need. So cellular respiration takes place in the mitochondria, and it takes place over 3 steps, and we're quite familiar with glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. I'm just going to break it down a little further. So cellular respiration, we're pretty familiar with it. It happens outside of the mitochondria in the cytoplasm. But kind of a recap of what it does, it's going to break down the 6-carbon glucose to 2 pyruvate molecules, and each of those pyruvate molecules have 3 carbons. And then what do we generate from the cycle? From every glucose molecule in glycolysis, we will make 2 ATP, 2 NADH, and 2 pyruvate molecules. So the pyruvate molecules diffuse into what's called the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, which we're familiar with. And what it's going to do, it's going to convert 3-carbon pyruvate into acetyl coenzyme A, now having 2 carbon molecules. This is what's going to go directly into that Krebs cycle. So what's going to happen is it gives off the carbon. Carbon gives off in the form of carbon dioxide, and this takes place inside the mitochondria matrix. So the Krebs cycle. What happens with the Krebs cycle, you get rid of 2 carbons in the acetyl coenzyme A, and it gives off as carbon dioxide. It produces ATP, adding energy to NADH, and NADH and adding energy also to FADH2. And just note that for the Krebs cycle, it's going to be 2 turns because in glycolysis we produce 2 pyruvic acid molecules when it splits into glucose. Side note about NAD and FAD is these are high energy electrons that carry electrons to the electron transport chain. All of this energy that was in glucose are now in NAD and FAD, and like I said, they're used in this last step here. Before the electron transport chain, the energy is used to pump protons, which is in the form of hydrogen ions, to the outside of the inner membrane to the inner membrane space. The byproduct here will be water. Protons flow through the ATP synthase, and this step makes a lot of energy because as in every proton flows to that ATP synthase, the chain will generate the ATP that our bodies need. So to kind of recap how we would calculate 30 ATP, so in glycolysis, steps 1 and 3 will consume some ATP, and in steps 7 and 10 will produce some ATP. It also consumes NAD plus and produces NADH, 6 molecules, and then it consumes FAD and produces FADH, but none of that happens in glycolysis. For the Krebs cycle, we don't consume any ATP, but we produce 6 ATP molecules. We consume NAD plus and produce NADH in steps 4, 5, and 9. We consume FAD and produce FADH2 in step 7. So to kind of recap, for 4 protons give rise to 1 ATP, 1 NADH produces 2.5 ATP, and then 1 FADH2 produces 1.5 ATP. So totaling, you'll see there the 10 NADH and then the 2 FADH plus and 2 ATP produced during each reaction, calculated with that equation will give you a 30 ATP.